So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Should you buy the iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2023? Now, we covered this late 2022 where I said it was a pretty good deal at this point. And where does it stand right now, as we're only about 5 or 6 months away from the iPhone 15 series? Right now, it's probably still a pretty decent deal. I'm gonna explain to you why. So you can get this in silver. You can get it in this graphite color, kind of like this 13 Pro Max right here. You can also get it in gold and Pacific blue, which is a darker blue color. Now, this can be found for right around $400 to $800, depending on the model you go with. You can buy it on places like eBay, Swappa. You can buy it on places like, refurbished stores, Amazon, things like that. There is some people trying to rip you off still, so be careful. Like, who's gonna pay $1,000 for a iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2023? So be careful of those higher price points. But this phone originally, when I first got it, was around $1,200 or so. So finding this phone at prices that are under the price of a smaller iPhone 14 or even the price of an iPhone 13 mini is pretty good, I would say. Now, do keep in mind, this did start with 128 gigs. So I was happy that Apple finally went with a higher base storage for this iPhone here, starting at 128 gig. Now, I have the 256 gig, but if you do go to up to 512, which is the maximum here, you are going to pay more money. So do keep that in mind. However, the iPhone 12 Pro Max doesn't have a 1 terabyte option. So if you are looking for, top level storage, you're gonna have to spring a little bit more to go ahead and get the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But yeah, overall, I would say colors, price point, they're still pretty nice options. They have some of the base colors, and if you really like dark navy blue, you'll like the Pacific blue color option. So let's revisit some of the key specifications that matter here. So you do have a 6.7-inch OLED display. This is a Super Retina XDR, and this display does have 2778 by 1284 pixels. So pretty good amount of pixels on here. It's well over 450 PPI. You do have a triple 12 megapixel rear camera here that is capable of 4K 60. Now, you also have a LiDAR sensor. This was, I think, the first iPhone to bring this. So that's pretty cool if you're doing like AR stuff and things like that. So if you want to see, like, if you're looking at those augmented images and Apple Store and stuff like that, and just using the power of the LiDAR, you're really going to enjoy this phone. Also, 6 gigabytes of RAM inside the body of this device, along with Apple's A14 Bionic. Talking about these A-series chipsets, I feel like I've been talking about them for years and years, being super powerful. And I feel like they've been so overpowered that even if you use an iPhone 12 Pro Max, you will not even break this phone's performance. It's not going to lag or nothing. So literally at this point, the A-series have been for years already overpowered. This one is proof of it. We'll talk more about performance later, but one of the things that's not so great about this phone is the size of the battery. So the size of the battery in here is a 3687 milliamp hour. Now, by comparison, the iPhone 14 Plus that just came out is around 800 milliamp hours bigger than this. So this is not going to be your best big iPhone battery life ever. But here's the thing, out of the 12 series, they were not the greatest. The 12 Pro was pretty horrible. So if you're getting a 12 Pro, I would go to Pro Max if you're looking for that longer battery. But those are just some of the key specifications that matter here. Do keep in mind too that this iPhone 12 Pro Max is going to provide you with the older, wider notch, not the newer one that got smaller here, like on an iPhone 14 Plus right there that came with the iPhone 13 model. So that even looks even a little bit more dated. So if you're really concerned about the latest and greatest look, this might not appeal to you too much. Now, from a body and a build perspective, this phone is still absolutely gorgeous. I got the silver color option, which I think is one of the most beautiful colors that you can buy, although it does show a lot of smudges on here. I was constantly wiping it down. And you can see quite a bit of scratches on the silver model because it's not really a painted or a polished version. It's just a pure stainless steel. It's still one of the more beautiful color options, I would say. But the actual build of this phone really isn't too much different from current day 13 Pro Maxes or 14 Pro Maxes. The only difference is those cameras look a little bit tiny compared to the newer ones. And it's funny because back in the day when these came out, these looked massive. So what's happening is actually the cameras are just getting more massive and massive as time has gone on. And I think we might see Apple reduce that on the iPhone 15 Pros, the bumps, but they're going to make the body thicker. So it's going to appear to be like it's not as large, but that's mainly because they're going to make the body thicker is what I've been hearing. Now, the iPhone 12 Pro Max in terms of weight with this body is actually somewhere in between an iPhone 14 Plus and iPhone 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max. It's around 200-ish, 228-ish grams. Whereas a 14 Plus is actually under, that. So if you want a lighter big iPhone, you'll want to swing for 14 Plus. If you want to save some money, be in a decently weight, but not the heaviest out there, the 12 Pro Max will be fine. Now, this is a Corning-made glass on the front, but I still find these iPhone glass to scratch quite easily. So I did wrap it in a screen protector, a tempered glass. I'm not sure if you want to do that, but they definitely scratch quite easily. Now, the back of this phone also does feature some Corning-made glass, and again, it's wrapped around that stainless steel frame. You'll see the 5G antenna because this is a 5G-enabled smartphone right here. But other than that, it still has the IP68 dust and water resistance of 6 meters for 30 minutes rated by Apple. So definitely you're going to have a really good, durable feel. You shouldn't worry too much about it getting dropped in water and stuff like that. Now, this does have something very important, a SIM card tray. So you'll still be able to swap between different phones if that's something you like to do, or if you just don't want to get onto that eSIM stuff and you just want to keep your, service on a SIM card. Buying a 12 Pro Max right now still provides you that, as does an iPhone 13 Pro Max over there if you want something a little bit newer, but we're talking 12 Pro Max here. Overall, this body and build, I would say I'm pretty shocked. I picked this up and I'm like, am I holding my 14 Pro Max again? Because it feels exactly the same. So this phone just shows that Apple's kind of like stayed the same for a while with this, Pro Max model. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with the 15 Pro Max or the 15 Ultra this year. Hopefully they really switch it up at this point. But here's just the thing. If you haven't had this type of device before, you've had a cheaper iPhone, I don't care if it's a 12 Pro Max, a 13 Pro Max, maybe even 11 Pro Max, probably not the 11 Pro Max at this point, but 14 Pro Max, these phones are going to feel incredibly high end. If you've used something like, an iPhone 10 or like an iPhone SE or even an iPhone 12, like these Pro Max models will feel top of the line. I don't care if it's still the 12 Pro Max at this point. Let's switch gears to talking about the display quality. Now, this one doesn't hit the highest brightness, but it's still quite bright. It hit 800 nits. That's similar to what Apple's still providing on 14 Plus and iPhone 14. Here's the thing though, on my 14 Pro Max, I always have the brightness lowered most of the time because it's too bright. The only area where this is not bright enough sometimes is in the most direct sunlight. It can be a little bit more difficult to see, but it tops out at 1200 nits peak. So you'll still see it. It's just not going to be very bright like you'll find on the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. However, keep in mind, this is not a comparison to those phones. You're still getting a really good solid resolution, a 19:9 aspect ratio, which means that the display is still quite wide, which means it's a really good reading experience, not much different from the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. You'll find over here that when you are reading articles, the notch is way up here on this bigger screen, so you kind of forget about it a little bit more. It doesn't stick quite out as much as, I kind of don't notice this as much as Dynamic Island, but you'll just find really decent, text on here, really sharp text, and very well-tuned display, just like the newer phones. If you go over here, you'll find True Tone on board, night shift, and dark mode as always. And overall, I feel like this display is exactly what I'm experiencing on 2023 iPhones that you just would buy today in the store. Only difference is the brightness compared to the newer Pro Max, but the brightness and display is about the same as the iPhone 14 Plus. So Apple's still selling this display in the form of a 14 Plus. So it's still modern. Let's just put it that way. Also, keep in mind, this display is 60 Hertz, but Apple does do some of the smoothest 60 Hertz out there. Now, my last video, when I compared the iPhone 14 Plus to a S23 Plus, you do really notice that that's a weak point when you compare it to a 120 Hertz smooth refresh rate. However, when you compare a 60 Hertz Android phone to a 60 hertz iPhone, there's no comparison. Apple's software and speed just really makes even their 60 hertz phones hum. So I think the average person will not care. And you could either buy this, which has a nicer display than something like an iPhone 13 with a bigger display for cheaper, or you can buy an iPhone 13 or 14, get a smaller panel that's not quite as beautiful as like a 12 Pro Max. It's up to you. So I'm just saying, like, if it was up to me, I would rather get this phone than get like an iPhone 13 and have a much bigger display, triple camera with telephoto zoom. I mean, you're getting a lot for your money here, especially that this is more than 50% off at this point. Now, when it comes to software, this is an area of the phone that you really have to decide. Are you going to be able to, how long do you want to keep it? Because this phone, it's 2023. It's going to get iOS 17, obviously. It's on the latest 16.4 right now. Let me tell you, it runs fantastic. Even on this latest version, it's like a brand new phone. That's how it runs. You'll have to decide, is this going to be the device that you're going to keep for more than 3 years? Because if you are, you're likely going to lose support. So I would say only pick up this phone if you only plan to keep it 2 to 3 years maximum when it comes to software support. Other than that, you will get the majority of the same features as the newer iPhones. Only difference is some of the camera features are a little bit different on the newer phones. They just look a little bit different, have a few little differences, but you still have the app library in here. Everything in software is going to operate identical to something like the latest iPhones out there, which is really nice. So if you're buying this, you don't have to feel like you're behind or anything like that. You even have some of the great focus modes on here as well. So you'll get these on this phone also. And it still pairs and works with other Apple products, just like the newer iPhones out there. So software wise, it's really down to the support of the software. Do you guys think you're going to need more than, let's say, 2 or 3 years? Because if you think you need more, then you'll definitely want to go ahead and spring for maybe the iPhone 13 Pro Max for a little bit more cash. But other than that, I would say that this is pretty darn good in software. It performs perfectly well, doesn't get warm, it's not heating up or nothing like that. And, it just works as well as what you would expect from something like a 14 model. So that's pretty good. Now, performance-wise, I actually was going to run a new speed test with this running iOS 16.4. But if you look throughout this video, you're probably noticing I cannot get any type of lag or stutter. Not that this ever had one to begin with. Apple has not had lags in years. So that's just not something that's associated with the Apple brand is lag. So you're not going to get none of that right now either. This is fantastic. I just love when I can recommend you guys a device that you're not going to pay half the price and you're going to get performance that rivals brand new phones. I mean, this is incredible. So I honestly think this would hold its own against some of the latest Android phones out there and just everyday usage. I'm not going to say in terms of pure performance, in terms of gaming and stuff like that, but you can edit videos on here. You can still play some of the top games out there. You can play some light games easily. You can message, you can camera, you could 4K. I mean, the chip is fine. This phone performs well. And this is one of the areas where Apple phones start to shine. It's when you are realizing that since day one, you bought this phone, they still perform like pretty much like day one. How many competing phones perform exactly like day one? I don't know. So definitely very happy with this. You can definitely count on the A14. It's still very good. And I used to, really be impressed with the iPads, how they performed over the long haul. But nowadays, I think the iPhones do just as well as the iPads. They had that one trip up year where they were getting a little bit lag. You think it was a 6S or something, but this one, I don't see it ever lagging. Honestly, I don't. Now, if there's an area you will be making a little bit of a sacrifice, it's going to be in the camera, but not really. Let me explain what I mean by that. So you're not really making a sacrifice because you still have even better lenses. Options like the ultra wide is pretty nice, but you have a better telephoto zooming capabilities and up to 12 times zoom versus you can't even get past 5x on the 14 Plus or 14. So there's actually a value add for this phone's telephoto over some newer iPhones that are selling for more money than this. So, I mean, look at that detail too. I mean, that's beautiful for sure. Nobody, you can make videos, photos, run your social media channels, run your blog, run whatever you're going to do, send off images to people, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever you're doing. Nobody is going to say anything if I shot a video on this phone. As long as I rocked it out in the 4K or higher resolution, ain't nobody going to say, look, bro, your video quality sucked. So definitely, it's fantastic still. The front-facing camera is also still really good because Apple has been keeping it backed out away, not too close to your face for a long time. Makes it a great vlogging phone or a great, selfie phone to get people in the picture. So they call it a pro phone for a reason because it has a pro camera setup. But where do you really notice any differences? Not in this great lighting, but where you'll really notice that the newer phones are getting much better is in the sharpness, kind of like the HDR stuff. Cinematic video, the portrait modes are far better than they used to be on this phone. Yeah, the front-facing cameras are a little bit better as well. Action mode, having a GoPro-like feature, that's something the 14 Plus has, this doesn't have. So you are missing, some of those neat add-ons and a little bit more sharpness. So yes, the newer cameras are better, but this still nails all the pro basics you need and still is better than some Android phones cameras. Honestly, some newer Android phones, I would still pick this over some of those. So take a look at some of my samples I've shot over the years with the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and you could decide if this is something you still want to consider in 2023.
Yeah, we can do that.
So discussing the battery life on the iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2023. This is a day phone, no more. I cannot stretch into the second day with this phone. And honestly, at 90%, right now, I notice that after it goes under 100, it starts to drain a little bit faster than what I would like. But I don't think anybody who's, out and about throughout their day is going to be rushing to a charger with this phone at all if they're just, busy doing stuff. If you start using the camera heavy, you start using the phone high brightness, using it heavy, this phone would still make it a full day, but it would be lower than something like a 14 Plus, obviously, or a 13 Pro Max, which was the king of battery life. It's not disappointing, but it's not great. So don't get this phone thinking I have the best battery iPhone out there. You don't, but you have a good one that should still do the job. So this would not detract me from recommending this phone right now, is basically what I'm trying to say to you. Now, the next one is the audio. Now, fortunately for you, if you're buying a 12 Pro Max, look at I'm all scratched up right there, by the way. If you're buying a 14 Pro Max, the audio is solid on here still. They haven't really improved this area of the phone, like how good the speakers sound, by a ton. You know, they've improved it a little, but not by a massive amount, I've noticed, in terms of loudness. However, the mics have gotten better on the newer iPhones. They sound better when you're making videos. So that's something you definitely will, appreciate if you went with a newer iPhone. But audio and mics are still very solid. No issues here. Now, I do want to talk about a little bit the phone call quality. The phone call quality on here is pretty darn good as well. This is the first year that Apple brought the Qualcomm back 5G modems. This is great. This is definitely set up for the long term. You're not going to be behind having this, phone because you have 5G. It's an important thing to discuss there. Now, biometrics of this phone, we're still using Face ID. And again, this experience feels no different than the latest iPhone on the market. So definitely, again, same thing. No issues with Face ID. You're going to be good on that front. So let me just wrap it up here because we talked connectivity, battery, audio, cameras. We discussed pretty much everything there is to know. If you wanted to get the best value option, the 13 Pro Max has a bigger price tag, but is a really good option. However, it's a much higher price tag. You'll find this one a couple $100 to $300 cheaper. That's a whole budget phone cheaper than the 13 Pro Max. So is 12 Pro Max still worth it? For the right user, yes. If you're the type of person who you don't want to be on any payment plans, anything like that, you just want to buy a used iPhone, you want to use it for a couple of years, this is going to be a great option for you. This also will be a great option for somebody who has this phone, want to pass it off to somebody. It's going to be a great gift to give to somebody if you no longer need it anymore. But really, this phone is going to be even more of a steal as the price comes down further. I mean, it's so awesome that you can buy these, half the price, sometimes under, and you're experiencing what most people are already experiencing with a 14 Pro Max. You're experiencing most of it. You honestly are. Like, you're getting it for half the price. You're experiencing most of it. It's kind of like a used car at this point. You can get a really good used car, or you can go buy a brand new car, take that depreciation hit, and then the other person will benefit from your car being a used car in the future. It's up to you. At the same time, I know people who are into the latest and greatest are not going to have anything to do with something like this. But listen, there are people out there who are not able to buy the latest and greatest. And this is a solid option if you could find it, I say under $500. I would not pay $650, $750 for this at this point, unless it had like 512 gigs. But like $500, this is a steal of a phone right here. Let me know your thoughts of the iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2023. Is this something you would buy, or is it something you would just say, forget about it? Minimum 13 Pro Max. Not a lot of people love the 14 Plus on this channel, but let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.